This podcast is brought to you by the Pro Bono Institute. PBI is a nonprofit organization that supports, enhances, and helps to transform the pro bono efforts of major law firms, in-house corporate legal departments, and public interest organizations in the U.S. and around the world. Welcome to the Pro Bono Happy Hour. I'm your host, Nihad Mansour, Associate Director of the law firm Pro Bono Project. In today's Challenge Signatory Showcase episode, I'm joined by two incredible guests working together on a powerful pro bono initiative. Katharyn Voit, who is Pro Bono Special Counsel for Duane Morris, who leads the firm's pro bono program globally, and Joel Silver, Vice President of Legal at Gilead Sciences, where he leads the regulatory law group and chairs the pro bono committee. We'll hear about Gilead Sciences' inspiring pro bono collaboration with Duane Morris to combat HIV criminalization, an effort focused on supporting people living with HIV who face unjust criminal charges, sex offender registry requirements, and other legal consequences rooted in outdated science and stigma. Joel and Kat join me to share how their teams built this innovative partnership, the role education and cross-sector collaboration play in this work, and how they are using pro bono to advance access to justice for people impacted by HIV criminalization. We find out about the amazing pro bono work by law firms and corporations through PBI's annual surveys sent to signatories of the Law Firm Pro Bono Challenge Initiative and the Corporate Pro Bono Challenge Initiative. PBI uses the surveys as an essential source of both quantitative and qualitative information about the pro bono programs of law firms and in-house corporate legal departments, and produces both a law firm challenge report and a CPBO challenge report every June with the data collected. Let's get into today's showcase.
Duane Morris represents Gilead Sciences on a billable corporate basis in a variety of different areas of work. And that is how we got to know Joel and the Pro Bono Committee. I think, as Joel will share, they have a very robust pro bono program, particularly for an in-house legal department. And they were looking to expand some of the different areas that they work in, including supporting individuals living with HIV. And in that capacity, reached out to us at Duane Morris, reached out to their lawyers at Duane Morris, who they work with, to say, would you be interested in exploring how to build, support individuals living with HIV and various decriminalization activities together? And of course, we said yes, because we love working with Gilead Sciences. Generally speaking, we also love working with our clients on a pro bono basis. And so we started exploring how we could endeavor to support individuals living with HIV in criminal actions, but also in helping with vacator expungement actions after the fact to combat the criminalization of HIV still today at that point in 2024 in the US. And Joel, I think you're more appropriate to give the background on what Gilead does and why this.
Yeah, absolutely. So as Kat mentioned, we have a pro bono program, and we focused in several areas, but really wanted to get involved in HIV work, because really our mission at Gilead is to end the HIV epidemic for everyone, everywhere. And HIV criminalization is actually a big part of this, because it results in stigmatization and sometimes can inhibit people seeking diagnostics or care. And so we just wanted to ensure that as lawyers, we were doing everything we could to address and focus on our mission, and really heard about HIV decriminalization through some of our collaborators. And for me, actually, it was really startling. I actually didn't know that was a thing. And as I dug in more and realized how serious it was and met some of the people dealing with it, it just became like a really strong focus for us. And as we'll talk through, there were a lot of challenges kind of getting into these pro bono cases. And so we needed law firm assistance, and Duane Morris has been just an amazing partner, really kind of jumped right in. And I think the two entities really focusing on this has made a huge difference.
Agree. I've done work in the record clearing vacator space for over a decade now. And I, before Joel told me, didn't know what a huge issue and problem criminalization of HIV and people living with HIV was. But for folks that don't know, I double checked the stats as of today, but 32 states across the US still criminalize some aspect of living with HIV. So either certain crimes because the person has HIV, there has an actual criminal statute on the books, or a harsher sentence because the person who committed the crime is living with HIV. And 5 states, I believe it's still 5, though Joel, you can correct me if I'm wrong, actually also require people living with HIV to register on their sex offender registry as a result of committing certain crimes that may or may not have a sexual offense or sexual component to it, but simply because they are a person living with HIV, they're required to register on the sex offender registry. And when I heard that, that was obviously beyond the pale shocking to me, particularly when we live in a world now where you equals you. And I can appreciate some of the stigmatization and fear around that decades ago. But today, you know, in 2024, when we started doing this work, that those laws were still on the books, or that was still something that existed, was shocking to me, and definitely something that we at Duane Morris wanted to help combat and undo with the folks at Gilead. And so the project then is kind of threefold, I would say, at this point. We started by just doing a lot of education for our colleagues on the Gilead side around vacator and the laws, working with the Center for HIV Law and Policy and the Williams Institute at UCLA. And then on the Duane Morris side, learning a lot about the work that Gilead does around different therapeutics and vaccines and you equals you, and where things are, you know, as far as care for what has become a chronic illness, so that we all were on the same playing field. So we did a bunch of trainings, and then we started doing outreach. And really, we've supported Gilead and outreach they've already done, but to legal aids around the country, as well as to, through the Center for HIV Law and Policy, public defender offices, to say, how can we support? And through that, we have taken on cases representing people who are on sex offender registries and seeking to help them petition to be removed from those registries when it's been years and years since their crime and they're still on these registries and it's impacting all aspects of their life. Helping create like a model pleadings database for public defenders that maybe don't have the time, resources to know how they can move to quash or object or, you know, what have you, different arguments. And then we provided some limited criminal defense and advice to individuals who are charged with crimes like these and that's over the past 2 years.
What has been the role of Duane Morris and Gilead Sciences in this project?
So I think initially the role has been identifying opportunities for pro bono clients where we can represent. It's somewhat challenging, for instance, if someone's facing a criminal charge, to actually identify who that person might be, because these are happening in, you know, jurisdictions where across the US. And sometimes they're actually not specifically targeting, or you can't tell from the record that it involves HIV. And this is horrific, but it might be assault with a deadly weapon when they're equating someone's saliva to a deadly weapon. And, you know, if you're just scrolling through criminal records, you're not going to identify that. So it's been kind of a grassroots collaborative with different entities that maybe would know that somebody's facing this charge, or potentially a public defender reaches out. So really, I think a lot of the work has been working with other organizations like CHLP and ETAF, Elizabeth Taylor AIDS Foundation, to kind of plug into their existing networks and see where we can help. So that's been a large focus. And for Gilead in particular, we have such a strong bench of scientific expertise, both within the company, but also across the country and across the world with clinicians and others, that we can really help from an expert standpoint, education in some instances. And I'd love to talk about a specific case with a DA, you know, educating the district attorney on like the science. And they actually are very receptive sometimes to hearing about that. So I would say that this is also very unique in that the other pro bono areas we support have really robust intake systems where, you know, there's people fall into certain categories and you can check for income and they have a specific charge or a specific, like say, restraining order, and we can just plug right in into a very smoothly run and an approach that's conserved across kind of all of the different cases. And here it's not that. Every case has a different fact pattern, and really trying to figure out how we can do that on a bespoke nature is challenging, but fun at the same time.
Yeah, I'd add that's the fun part of it. And I think that's part of where Duane Morris comes in to this is, I mean, the folks at Gilead, their knowledge both on the legal and science side of HIV is just miles deep. Duane Morris has a large footprint across the US. And so these cases have been popping up in various states. And so we've been able to support Gilead's desire here and ours too. But they find a case and then it's calling me and I'm finding, the criminal defense attorneys in that jurisdiction or who are licensed in that jurisdiction that might be willing to go and be our local counsel there or from Duane Morris be the counsel and then co-counsel with the folks at Gilead who bring a lot of the expertise to the subject to attack. And it varies. I think your example is going to be a good one because I know the case, Joel, but whether it's, educating ahead of time, hopefully, with the DA or supporting a defender or petitioning a registry or appeals post 15 years afterwards, trying to appeal determinations of folks being on sex offender registries, but figuring out like what is the right tribunal, what is the argument. And my colleagues at Duane Morris have enjoyed that they are head scratchers. They aren't just plug and chug. There's something different. And I think what we've brought to the project then is that we have folks kind of all over that are willing to collaborate or happy to collaborate with Joel and his colleagues.
This is like a power team. Both of you have exactly what the other one needs in a way. And the fact that this wasn't an existing pro bono project is really cool to start from nothing and try to create something that actually doing this and being willing to look for different cases and try it. I think that's amazing that you both are willing to do that. And even to hear that the attorneys that love that.
Yeah, I think that's been the hard part too. I think Joel and his team, we wish we could more easily find more cases, not because we want them to exist, but we would like to be able to help more people. And that has been the hard part of the case is getting to know really hyper local legal aids or other like social service agencies that are providing support to people living with HIV who hear about this person who, like Joel said, has a charge that is not saying HIV in the title of the statute. But when you look into it and the facts, you realize that's what's happening. So it's hard to find the cases. And I think we wish we could figure out a easier, but that's the nature of it. And fortunately, Gilead has longstanding relationships with all these different organizations that call you all.
Yeah.
So
and I know Kat would agree with me on this. Our ultimate objective is we don't ever have to find these cases. They are so ridiculous and should never be brought. And I sometimes feel like the prosecutors would tend to agree given the chance. So I hope we would get to a point where we'll never have to do this work. And I think we will, but we're not quite there yet.
What organizations did Duane Morris and Gilead Sciences collaborate with for this project, and why are those collaborations so important?
I'm not going to be able to list them all, so Kat, please add in. We walked in very naive, and I want to kind of emphasize, there's great organizations out there. CHLP, I mentioned one of them, Elizabeth Taylor AIDS Foundation, the Williams Institute through UCLA. And there's also, there's universities and networks, and we've been working with investigators actually and clinicians who have expertise as well. So there's just a huge network of people all working in different areas of this, but it really takes that level to span the national footprint of this issue. So I don't know, Kat, if I'm missing some organizations.
I think you mentioned the big ones. Yeah. Oh, and Sero's the only other one. So is another organization that works on these issues. And I know one of our clients works closely with them. The only thing I'd add is like super hyper local orgs working in a particular city or small town, and that they're providing various therapy, food, shelter, community, and they hear about somebody in their community that's pulled a charge and don't per se know. And so I think the folks you mentioned have those relationships where they find out, where the local organizations will go to them looking for resources and find out about the cases, because some of them have been not in places you wouldn't necessarily think.
What impact has this pro bono work made?
So if I can give a specific example.
You should give your example as the...
Yeah, I obviously can't give specific details, but I think this one is illustrative of what a perfect outcome might be. We found out about an individual who was being charged with assault with a deadly weapon based on the fact that that individual had allegedly spit at a police officer or somebody, not clear if they were in fact law enforcement, but that because of the fact that they had HIV and ultimately they were being charged with that crime. And so equating saliva to effectively a deadly weapon. And we looked at this and thought, and through the help of Duane Morris, kind of how can we help the public on the defense and actually maybe get involved directly with the criminal defense. The person was also being charged with a strike, actually a third strike, so it could result in life or a minimum of 25 years. So really significant charge. And it became a challenge for us from a defense perspective. Like, how can we get involved if we're unsuccessful? This will have, a dramatic implication on this person's life. So we felt we had to either get them everything possible from a defense perspective, or I would say maybe try a Hail Mary, which was to just write to the district attorney and tell them basically the science. And that's what we did on both fronts, both from a defense perspective, but also send a letter and laid out the science, basically said that it's U equals U, so undetectable equals untransmittable. That CDC has stated that you cannot transmit HIV through saliva. So it was a physical impossibility that what they were charging this person with could actually occur. And basically asked both to drop this case, or at least that charge, and to never prosecute this again. And then heard back from the district attorney that they agreed and they would not be pressing charges. They were going to drop the assault with a deadly weapon charge, and that they would no longer be prosecuting that in the county. So I think it was an eye-opener both for the district attorney that somebody in that staff was charging for these alleged crimes, and really kind of corrected. In the way that we received the information, it was clear that that was intended to be a directive to the county. So it both had a huge impact on that person, but also hopefully on future criminalization charges in that area. And I'm hoping actually in the state potentially.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's huge. I just want to say I got chills when you said that. That just imagining 25 years or life not being in jail because of this, that's incredible. Thank you for sharing.
Yeah, and it has been, I think, an eye-opener that this isn't something that you have to have a huge legal background, that you have to be, well-versed, Johnny Cochran, ready to get somebody off. You could actually just, if you find out about this, you could notify your DA. It literally, well, we should check the CDC website, but it should be on a website that says this cannot occur, and you can kind of inform somebody of that, and hopefully, this won't happen again. And if maybe it's not us, but someone else could do this.
The SORA cases, SORA Sex Offender Registry Act cases. So we've taken on 3 cases for people in different jurisdictions where, generally speaking, in each of these cases, the person was in a consensual sexual relationship. They had told their partner about their HIV status. Fast forward, the relationship ended, and then the person used that information, or somehow in passing it came up, and the person was charged with and convicted of crimes related to exposing somebody to HIV, or other crimes that carried with it a responsibility to register on the sex offender registry. And depending upon the jurisdiction, it could be for life or for, a long period. And like I said, there are 5 states that still have these laws on the books, and some states where the person moves into another state can be very murky about the jurisdiction on when somebody can petition to remove themselves from the sex offender registry in either state. And I think anybody who's listening to this podcast can appreciate the impact of having to register on a sex offender registry on somebody's life, whether that be housing, family, job. I'm setting aside just the mental impact of that, which obviously is huge, for something that is not a sex offense, but how they're being labeled, how damaging that can be for a variety of reasons. And so we have taken on these cases to petition to remove the person from the sex offender registry, showing it's been a long enough period, various equities arguments, and in that also trying to educate and perhaps support some of the organizations we mentioned around legislative reforms to end the practice of requiring people to register on sex offender registries for crimes that I would argue are not sexual offenses, particularly not in this where we are now with the science. And as Joel said, U equals U, this is not even something, and I should say in each of these cases, the person was on various therapies and their HIV was undetectable and untransmittable, but they were still forced to register because of these criminal laws still on the books that do not appropriately reflect the science and the reality at this point. And so trying to, create to support the various organizations we talked about who are seeking to create legislative change there.
Yeah, and I think that's a really important point, that just both the defense work and trying to get people off of registries is the immediate objective, with simultaneously changing legislation and policy in the future. And we have seen a number of states kind of remove their sex offender registry statutes. And I think I'm hoping that'll be across the country in short order. It really does result in really, really pernicious stigmatization that often can scare people into getting tested because they know they always would have this kind of, this potential liability hanging over them. So it's really backwards, where everybody wants to end the epidemic, yet states are doing the opposite by kind of keeping these, really old statutes on the books.
So true. So true. And I think to echo just what Joel said before, a lot of this is education, right? I mean, when I talk to lawyers about the work we've done, they're in big law, right? And folks have no idea, despite being very educated, successful, in the know, have no idea that these sorts of laws are still on the books. And I think a lot of it is public education. And that this should not have been a law necessarily to begin with because of all the misunderstandings that originally drove the creation of the law, but it still exists and the really harmful effects it's having towards people seeking testing care and eradicating.
Yeah, and I'll say that when you see the law initially, it might not sound quite as bad as it is, in that when you see intentional exposure to HIV, you might think, well, this is only being used for people who are actually transmitting and going around, almost intentionally, I don't know, doing something really, really sketchy. And that's just not how now I have experience in this area. That's not actually how these cases are prosecuted. These are people who are taking a lot of precaution, who have done nothing wrong, who had no chance of transmission, and they're being charged based on a relationship that soured, and basically having to prove that they had a signed affidavit effectively with witnesses that they informed of their status and all this stuff. And it's being used really, really in an evil way, I would say. And so that's why these really need to get removed, because it opens up to just gaming and misuse.
What is the most challenging part of this type of pro bono work?
For me, the hardest part of this, from a pro bono manager, organizer perspective, wanting to support this amazing work that Gilead's doing and wants to do, and forming relationships, because you're drilling into before cases in any way appealed or a public case or what have you, knowing about them or being able to assist, because the docket might be sealed, or depending upon the jurisdiction, the docket might be behind a paywall. Like, being able to identify and provide that sort of service has been difficult. And of course, that's been the benefit of working with nationally known organizations that then work with folks locally who know that we're a resource if and when one of these cases comes. But just building those relationships so that they know and trust us and reach out to us, and wanting to be as useful as we can. But it's not, like Joel said, like a PFA pro bono project or an immigration project where you can call your local legal aid and they've got many cases that they can just send over for good, potentially. But
Yeah, and just kind of a different angle on this. I'd say one of the challenges for the actual cases is that the people are often being charged under these really heinous charges, like sex offender and assault with a deadly weapon, or something that just from a policy standpoint, people don't want to touch. They're like, nobody wants to be like light on sex offenders. So it's really separating or educating and saying, no, this case is different. This isn't a sex offense. This isn't some sort of illegal exposure type thing. It's different, and it really should be treated differently. And getting prosecutors or getting public defenders even to understand that. I'd also say, because the cases aren't very widely known, a lot of times there's not a lot of education. So you'd get maybe the first case in 10 years in a certain county. And so the public offender that gets the case won't have any idea. And they have like 30 cases on their docket. And so they're just going to try to plead it out. And it's our objective to get in there and quickly and educate and help and say, you don't want to plead this one out, because as Kat said, it might come with a sex offender registration at the end. But oftentimes, because these cases both are really unknown, they're hard to litigate from a defense perspective without a lot of resources. And they can have sneaker impacts that people don't realize, like criminal time. Sometimes you plead out and you thought that you didn't get any jail time, and then you go to court and the judge says, oh, you're going to have like a year of hard labor or something like that. Plus, oh, by the way, you're now a sex offender for the rest of your life. Like that. I think nobody expected that when they pled a misdemeanor or a low-level felony.
Is there any advice that you would give to other firms or legal departments who want to become more focused on this pro bono issue or other pro bono issues?
Well, becoming more focused on this issue, I do think the organizations we've mentioned already have just a robust amount of research on their websites and manuals for public defenders and others who are working in this space. So if you want to get to know more about that, just go look at Elizabeth Taylor AIDS Foundation, Williams Institute, CHLP. They all have just phenomenal websites, and with information that they keep up in real time, state by state, charge by charge. Actually, that's part of the work we've helped them do. I forgot about that, but we did help them update one of those manuals over last summer. So there's lots of information out there if you're looking into the issue specifically, and phenomenal, dedicated, very intelligent lawyers who have really focused on this, and researchers, professors, clinicians who have dedicated their lives to this. And so I think that's also always a good admonition working in this space and other spaces is, as the private law firm coming into this space, always respecting that whether it's perhaps the in-house corporate team or these other entities have spent years and years really becoming experts in this field, and to be humble to learn about the issues in the space, how they come up, how to combat them, to be open to different types of advocacy. I think that's one thing I have certainly been grateful in how Joel and his team have modeled of different ways to approach the problem, not just the like, we're going to be your defense counsel and we go, but different ways to advocate around it. And that normally is the big law firm. You come in and you're like, we're going to sue. So just working with the folks who've been working in this space for a long time and asking them what sort of help they need. How can you support them? What other work would they like to be able to do that they just don't have capacity for is a great way to get started and for them to get to know you, your colleagues, and that you're there for the long haul.
From an organization standpoint, I would say really finding something that people are passionate about is really important. And as chair of Pro Bono, I had certain areas that I wanted to focus on, like domestic violence. And we have a great program, but I know that we really are committed to HIV and ending the epidemic, but it didn't seem like there were obvious legal pathways to do that. But just keep pushing, keep going after those pathways. And like once you kind of tap into it, you can get so much more energy, I would say, and commitment from both the employees, but also firms that are working with you that are also passionate about that. So really, yeah, I would say opening opportunities. Often there's kind of it's hard to manage a lot of different things. So a lot of organizations will say like, we do one thing, and you can kind of join this clinic once a year or something. And that's great to have at least something, but I do think you need to keep looking and keep the dialogue with people who want to be involved. And that isn't limited to, for instance, HIV decriminalization. We'll get individuals in the company who say, I am really passionate about, say, conservatorships or something specific. And just that might be the only person at the company who does it or the firm, but they can do amazing things. They can take on multiple cases, and also pairing up is a big thing. Like having a Duane Morris where I feel comfortable if I'm going to take on a case, I'm going to have backup or even leads, because a lot of times we're so busy, you just don't have that kind of bandwidth to ensure that you can drop everything. But usually if you have 2 or 3 people on a case, someone can pick it up.
The one thing I would add is then on the flip side, since this is for PBI and we're a corporate and law firm pro bono leaders, I know there's always the drive from the law firm side to be another service provider to your in-house counsel on the pro bono space, in addition to all the other work you do to foster that relationship and grow and deepen it, which I think has definitely, at least from my perspective or the law firm perspective, has in this collaboration. But this also was really remarkable or exciting for us because normally I'm pitching to in-house counsel like, we'd love to do pro bono with you. And this was the opposite, where our in-house colleagues came to us and said, this is something from our GC and our GC's office we really want to do. What do you know about it? Will you do it with us? And I think it's a great example to what you said, Joel, of finding that, which is a passion project for your in-house colleagues or their leaders. And from that, it makes doing a corporate client pro bono collaboration much easier than many are, where you're pitching, what about this, what about that? And is a great reminder of our in-house colleagues have passions and issues that they're interested about personally, or what the business's mission is. And being able to tie that into pro bono makes it a much easier, more robust collaboration to get off the ground, and a win-win for everybody involved.
Definitely. And I would just encourage, I know pro bono tends to come from law firms, but corporate environments are really impactful as well. There's really strong attorneys in corporations. And I do think that from a leadership perspective, it's critical that time be permitted for this kind of work, because I think it both develops skills for the attorneys, it does amazing things for our communities, and it builds that connection with and networks in different communities. Particularly, it can be those that are also areas that you work and that are critical partnerships from your business as well.
Thanks to Kat Voit and Joel Silver for their leadership and expertise. Special thanks to Duane Morris for doing great work and being a law firm Pro Bono Challenge signatory. If your law firm or in-house legal department is interested in becoming a challenge signatory, check out PBI's website for more information. Thanks for listening, and be sure to tune in next time on the Pro Bono Happy Hours Challenge Signatory Showcase series to hear more about innovative pro bono work.